My name is Jessica Martinez, and I'm about to tell you how my spoiled younger sister tried to steal my inheritance and ended up learning the hardest lesson of her life. Picture this. Your 25-year-old sister storms into your apartment, throws legal papers at you, and demands you hand over $3 million that she thinks belongs to her. Now imagine her face when she discovers that not only do I control every penny of that money, but I've been watching her every move for the past 2 years, waiting for exactly this moment. The look of pure shock when she realized she'd just destroyed her own future, absolutely priceless. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I continue, please hit that like button if you're ready for a wild ride, and subscribe if you love stories about justice being served. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Let me take you back to where it all started. It was a Tuesday morning in October when everything changed forever. I was in my home office reviewing quarterly reports for Martinez Industries when I heard keys jingling at my front door. Only 3 people had keys to my penthouse apartment. Me, my housekeeper Rosa, and unfortunately, my sister Vanessa. Rosa only came on Thursdays, which meant trouble was walking through my door in designer heels. Jessica! Vanessa's voice echoed through my apartment like nails on a chalkboard. We need to talk. Now. I saved my work and walked to the living room, where I found my sister pacing like a caged animal. Her long black hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless as always, but her usual confident smirk was replaced by something I'd never seen before: desperation. Good morning to you too, Vanessa, I said calmly, settling into my favorite armchair. Coffee? She whirled around, her designer purse clutched in her manicured hands. Don't play games with me, Jess. I know about the trust fund. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my face neutral. What trust fund? Grandfather's trust fund, she screamed, pulling a stack of papers from her bag and throwing them at me. $3 million that should have been split between us, but somehow you've been hiding it for 2 years. I picked up the papers slowly, scanning the legal documents. Someone had done their homework. These were copies of our grandfather's original will, the one filed with probate court. But what Vanessa didn't know was that this was only half the story. Where did you get these? I asked quietly. Does it matter? The point is, I know the truth now. Grandfather left us each $1.5 million, and you've been keeping my half. I want it. All of it. Today. I studied my sister's face. At 25, Vanessa had never worked a day in her life. She'd dropped out of 3 colleges, burned through countless jobs that our parents had gotten her, and spent the last 5 years living off credit cards and charm. Her current lifestyle, the luxury apartment in Miami, the constant shopping sprees, the exotic vacations, was funded entirely by our parents, who enabled her every whim. But apparently, Mom and Dad had finally cut her off. Vanessa, I said carefully, sit down. Let's talk about this rationally. Rationally? She laughed hysterically. There's nothing rational about you stealing from your own sister. I've been struggling for months while you're living in this penthouse, driving that Tesla, running your little company. All with my money. Your money? I stood up, my patience finally wearing thin. When's the last time you earned $1, Vanessa? When's the last time you worked for anything in your life? Her face twisted with rage. I shouldn't have to work. Grandfather left us that money so we could live comfortably. But you've been hoarding it like some greedy witch. And what exactly do you think you deserve this money for? Your sparkling personality? Your work ethic? Your contribution to society? She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. I deserve it because it's mine, and if you don't transfer every penny to my account by Friday, I'm taking you to court. I looked at the legal papers again, then back at my sister's furious face. She had no idea what she'd just walked into. No idea that I'd been preparing for this moment since the day grandfather died. "Okay," I said simply. "Let's go to court." Her confident mask slipped for just a second. She'd expected me to cave, to write her a check on the spot like our parents always did. "I'm serious, Jessica. I have lawyers." "Good. You'll need them." I walked to my desk and pulled out a business card. "Here's my attorney's information. Have your lawyers call him. We'll settle this properly." Vanessa snatched the card, her hands shaking with fury. "You're going to regret this. When I get my money, I'm never speaking to you again." "Promise?" I asked sweetly. After she stormed out, slamming the door so hard my windows rattled, I sat back down and opened my laptop. I had some calls to make. The game was finally beginning, and Vanessa had no idea she was already losing. Let me tell you about my grandfather, Roberto Martinez. He came to America from Mexico with nothing but $20 and a dream. He worked construction during the day and went to night school to learn English and business. By the time I was born, he owned the largest construction company in Texas. But grandfather wasn't just successful. He was smart. Street smart in a way that comes from building something from nothing. He watched his granddaughters grow up, and he saw exactly who we were becoming. I was 8 years old when I started following him around his construction sites, asking questions about everything. How do you make concrete stronger? Why do some buildings fall down in earthquakes? He'd answer every question patiently, teaching me about engineering, business, and life. "Mija," he'd say. In his thick accent, "Money is like water. It flows to where it's needed most. But you have to build the right channels or it just washes away." Vanessa, on the other hand, was more interested in the money than where it came from. Even as a little girl, she'd ask grandfather to buy her toys, clothes, anything she wanted. And he usually did, because she was adorable and knew exactly how to twist him around her little finger. But as we got older, the differences became impossible to ignore. I studied business and engineering, graduating summa cum laude from Stanford. I spent my summers working at construction sites, learning the business from the ground up. By the time I was 22, I was running project management for Martinez Industries. Vanessa bounced from major to major, party to party, boyfriend to boyfriend. She was beautiful and charming, and she'd learned that those qualities could get her almost anything she wanted. Why work when you could smile and bat your eyelashes? Grandfather saw it all. And in his final years, as he watched Vanessa's behavior become more and more entitled, he made some very careful decisions about his legacy. The will that Vanessa had found was real. Grandfather had indeed left us each $1.5 million, but what she didn't know was that there was a second document, filed separately, that changed everything. A trust agreement. And guess who he'd named as the trustee? 3 days after Vanessa's dramatic visit, my lawyer called with an update. "She's hired Blackstone and Associates," Michael Chen said. "Expensive firm. They're good, but they don't know what they're walking into." "Have they requested the full documentation yet?" "That's the interesting part. They've only asked for the probate records. They have no idea about the trust." I smiled, leaning back in my office chair. How long before they figure it out? Could be weeks, could be months. Depends how thorough they are. But Jessica, once they discover the trust agreement, they're going to come at you hard. Are you ready for that? Was I ready? I'd been ready for 2 years. "Michael, remember what we discussed about the conditions for distribution?" "Every detail. Your grandfather was very specific." "Good. Let them come." Meanwhile, Vanessa was living it up in Miami, apparently convinced that she'd already won. Her Instagram was full of pictures from expensive restaurants and luxury spas. "Celebrating early," read one caption with a picture of champagne and caviar. "Big things coming. Blessed John Trust Fund Life." She'd even started shopping for a new car. A white Maserati that cost more than most people's houses. The dealer had called me directly. Apparently, she'd listed me as a reference and told them I'd be transferring money for the purchase. I politely declined to provide the reference. But the real show was happening at home. Mom called me every day, begging me to just give Vanessa her half. Jessica, honey, she's your sister. Family is more important than money. You're absolutely right, Mom. Family is more important. That's exactly why Grandfather set things up the way he did. What do you mean? I never answered directly. Let her wonder. Let them all wonder. Dad tried the guilt approach. Your grandfather would be disappointed to see his granddaughters fighting over money. Would he? Or would he be proud that someone finally held Vanessa accountable? The truth was, I knew exactly what Grandfather would think. Because he'd told me himself, in the letter he'd written to me before he died. A letter that was sealed in Michael's safe, waiting for the right moment. 2 weeks later, the breakthrough came. Vanessa's lawyers had finally done a comprehensive asset search and discovered the trust. Michael called me at 6 a.m., laughing. They found it. Blackstone just filed a motion demanding full disclosure of trust assets and terms. They're not happy. How not happy? They're demanding an emergency hearing. They're claiming you've been in breach of fiduciary duty by not distributing the funds immediately. And you told them? That we'd be delighted to present the full terms of the trust in court. The hearing's set for next Friday. Perfect. I'd been waiting 2 years for this moment. That afternoon, Vanessa showed up at my apartment again. But this time, she wasn't alone. She'd brought our parents for backup, and her lawyer, a sharp-dressed man in his 50s who looked like he charged by the minute. Jessica, Mom started before they'd even sat down, this has gone too far. We need to settle this as a family. I agree completely, I said. Let's settle it. The lawyer, who'd introduced himself as Thomas Blackstone, opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Miss Martinez, I'm going to be direct. My client has discovered that you've been acting as trustee of a substantial trust fund that rightfully belongs to her. We're prepared to file criminal charges for embezzlement if this isn't resolved immediately. I looked at him calmly. Mr. Blackstone, have you read the full trust agreement? Of course I have. All of it? Including the distribution requirements? His confident expression flickered. The relevant portions. Yes. Interesting. Because if you'd read all of it, you'd know that the trust funds can only be distributed when very specific conditions are met. Vanessa leaned forward. What conditions? Nobody told me about conditions. I walked to my safe and pulled out a bound document. This is your copy of the full trust agreement, Vanessa. You should probably read it before making any more threats. She grabbed it eagerly, her eyes scanning the pages. At first, her expression was triumphant, then confused, then horrified. This can't be legal, she whispered. Oh, it's completely legal, I assured her. Grandfather had the best lawyers in Texas draw it up. Every word was carefully chosen. Mr. Blackstone took the document from Vanessa's trembling hands. As he read, his face went pale. What does it say? Mom demanded. I smiled. Why don't you read it out loud, Mr. Blackstone? I'm sure everyone would love to hear the conditions for distribution. He cleared his throat, his voice tight. The trust funds shall be distributed to Vanessa Martinez upon meeting the following requirements. First, she must have maintained steady employment for a minimum of 2 consecutive years. Second, she must have demonstrated financial responsibility by maintaining a debt-to-income ratio of no more than 30% for 24 consecutive months. Third, she must complete a minimum of 100 hours of community service annually for 2 consecutive years. The room was silent. You could have heard a pin drop. There's more, I said helpfully. Keep reading. Fourth, Mr. Blackstone continued reluctantly, She must submit to quarterly financial audits conducted by an independent accounting firm. Fifth, she must complete either a college degree or professional certification program. And finally, he paused, swallowing hard. The trustee has sole discretion to determine if and when these conditions have been satisfactorily met. Vanessa was staring at the document like it was written in a foreign language. But I need the money now. I have debts. I have expenses. How much debt? I asked quietly. That's not relevant, Mr. Blackstone interrupted. Actually, it is. The trust agreement requires full financial disclosure from the beneficiary. Vanessa, how much do you owe? She looked at our parents, panic in her eyes. It's not that much. How much? Maybe 50,000. 60. Tops. I pulled out another folder. According to the credit report I pulled last week, you owe $127,000 across 14 different credit cards. Your monthly minimum payments are more than most people's salaries. You haven't made a payment on time in 8 months. Dad's face went white. Vanessa, you told us you only owed a few thousand. I was handling it, she screamed. I just needed a little more time. Time to do what? You don't have a job. You don't have any income. You've been living off cash advances from one credit card to pay the minimums on the others. The room erupted in chaos. Mom was crying, Dad was shouting at Vanessa about her lies, and Mr. Blackstone was frantically taking notes. But I just sat there calmly, watching my sister's perfect world crumble around her. This was exactly what Grandfather had predicted would happen. There's something else you should know, I said when the shouting died down. The trust agreement includes a clause about fraudulent attempts to claim the funds. Mr. Blackstone looked up sharply. What kind of clause? If the beneficiary attempts to claim the funds through legal action before meeting the conditions, or if they make false statements about their financial situation in order to qualify, they forfeit their right to the trust permanently. Vanessa's face went ash gray. You're lying. Page 12, paragraph 4. Read it yourself? She flipped through the pages with shaking hands, her eyes growing wider as she found the section. This isn't fair. You set me up. I didn't set up anything. Grandfather did. He spent 2 years watching you, Vanessa, watching how you treated money, how you treated responsibility, how you treated family, and he decided that you needed to prove yourself before you could inherit his life's work. He had no right. He had every right. It was his money, his company, his decision. Mr. Blackstone was already packing up his briefcase. Miss Martinez, I'm afraid we need to reconsider our legal strategy. This trust agreement is ironclad. Wait. Vanessa grabbed his arm. There has to be something we can do. Some way to break it. The only way to access the funds is to meet the conditions outlined in the trust. After they left, Vanessa sobbing, our parents in stunned silence, and Mr. Blackstone probably calculating his billable hours. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony, looking out over the city. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. How did it go? Exactly as planned, I typed back. Phase 1 complete. And Vanessa? I thought about my sister, probably crying in her luxury apartment that she could no longer afford, surrounded by designer clothes bought with borrowed money, finally facing the reality of her choices. Phase 2 begins now, I replied. You see, what nobody understood, not my parents, not Vanessa, not even her expensive lawyer, was that I'd never wanted to keep the money from her. I wanted her to earn it, to become the person Grandfather had hoped she could be. But first, she had to hit rock bottom. The next few weeks were brutal for Vanessa. Word had gotten out about her financial situation, probably through her lawyer's office, though these things had a way of spreading on their own. Her credit cards were maxed out, her rent was due, and her wealthy friends suddenly became very busy when she called. She tried to get a job, but her resume was basically blank. No work experience, no completed degree, no skills beyond looking pretty and spending money. The few places that did call her back offered minimum wage positions that wouldn't even cover her monthly expenses, let alone her debt. Mom called me every day, begging me to help. Jessica, she's living on ramen noodles. She had to sell her jewelry just to make rent. Good, I said. Maybe she's finally learning what money is actually worth. She's your sister. Exactly. Which is why I'm not enabling her anymore. But I wasn't completely heartless. I was watching, waiting for signs that Vanessa was ready to change. And slowly, those signs began to appear. First, she stopped posting on social media. The constant stream of luxury lifestyle photos disappeared, replaced by silence. That was progress. She was finally too embarrassed to keep pretending her life was perfect. Then, she started actually showing up to job interviews. A friend of Rose's mentioned seeing Vanessa at a restaurant, interviewing for a waitressing position. She didn't get the job. Apparently, she'd never waited tables before and couldn't handle the stress of the trial shift. But she'd tried. The breakthrough came 6 weeks after the disastrous family meeting. Vanessa called me, and for the first time in years, she didn't sound entitled or demanding. She sounded broken. Jess? Can we talk? Of course. Not on the phone. Can I come over? When she arrived at my apartment, I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger, more vulnerable, and completely exhausted. I lost the apartment, she said, without preamble. I'm staying with Mom and Dad, but they're making me sleep in my old room and do chores like I'm 15 again. I nodded, waiting. I finally got a job. It's just retail at the mall, but it's something. Minimum wage, but they said if I work hard, I might get promoted to shift supervisor in a few months. That's good, Vanessa. I also? She took a shaky breath. I called the credit counseling service you mentioned. They're helping me set up a payment plan. It's going to take forever to pay everything off, but at least I have a plan. I felt a small spark of hope. How does it feel? Terrifying, she admitted. I wake up every morning wondering how I'm going to make it through the day. But also, she paused, looking surprised. Kinda good? Like I earned my paycheck. I worked for it. Nobody gave it to me. This was the conversation I'd been waiting 2 years to have. Vanessa, do you understand why grandfather set up the trust the way he did? She was quiet for a long moment. I think so. He knew I was spoiled. He knew I didn't appreciate anything because I'd never had to work for anything. And he wanted me to learn, to become someone who could handle that kind of responsibility. Tears started flowing down her cheeks. But Jess, I'm so scared I'll never be good enough. What if I can't meet all those conditions? What if I'm just not strong enough? This was the moment. The moment I'd been preparing for since the day I'd read grandfather's letter. I walked to my desk and pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age. Before he died, grandfather wrote letters to both of us. He gave me yours to hold until I thought you were ready to read it. Her hands shook as she took the envelope. What does it say? Read it. She opened it carefully, unfolding the handwritten pages. As she read, her expression changed from confusion to understanding to something that looked like peace. He says, her voice broke. He says he loved me too much to let me stay weak. He says the money was never supposed to be a gift. It was supposed to be a reward for becoming the woman he knew I could be. I nodded. Keep reading. He says, oh, my God. He says he knew you'd take care of me, that you'd make sure I had what I needed while I learned to stand on my own feet. She looked up at me with wonder. You've been helping me this whole time, haven't you? It was true. While I'd refused to give Vanessa money directly, I'd been working behind the scenes to make sure she didn't completely self-destruct. I'd talked to her landlord when she was late on rent, giving her extra time to find solutions. I'd made sure she had health insurance through a family policy. I'd even arranged for her to get interviews at places where I had connections, though she had to earn the jobs herself. Grandfather asked me to be your trustee because he knew I'd be tough enough to say no when you needed to hear no, but caring enough to catch you if you really fell. And the conditions in the trust? Are all achievable. Grandfather didn't set you up to fail, Vanessa. He set you up to succeed, but only if you were willing to do the work. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. So, what happens now? Now you keep working. You keep learning. You keep growing. And when you've met the conditions, not just the letter of them, but the spirit of them, the money will be there. But what if I fail? I smiled, thinking of our grandfather's weathered hands and patient voice. Then you get back up and try again. That's what he did. That's what I did. And that's what you'll do too. 3 months later, Vanessa was still working at the mall, but she'd been promoted twice. She'd also started taking night classes at the community college, working toward a business degree. Her debt was slowly shrinking, and for the first time in her life, she had a budget that she actually followed. More importantly, she was different. The entitlement was gone, replaced by genuine gratitude for everything she earned. She'd volunteer at the local food bank on weekends, and she'd started mentoring other young women who were struggling with financial responsibility. I never understood before, she told me over coffee one Sunday morning. I thought money was just something that appeared when you needed it. I had no idea how much work it took to earn it, or how easy it was to lose it if you weren't careful. And now I understand why Grandfather was so proud of what he built. It wasn't just about the money, it was about what the money represented. Years of hard work, smart decisions, taking care of family. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo. Speaking of taking care of family, it was a picture of a new construction project, a low-income housing development that Martinez Industries was building. We're expanding into affordable housing. The profit margins are smaller, but the impact is bigger. I could use someone who understands what it's like to struggle financially to help design the community programs. Her eyes lit up. You mean, if you're interested in a career change after you finish your degree, there might be a place for you at the company. But you'd start at the bottom, just like I did. You'd have to prove yourself every step of the way. I'd love that, she said quietly. To be part of something that actually matters. A year and a half later, Vanessa had met every single condition in the trust. She'd maintained steady employment, gotten her debt under control, completed her community service, finished her degree, and passed every financial audit with flying colors. But more than that, she'd become the person Grandfather had always believed she could be. The day I transferred the first portion of her inheritance, Grandfather had been smart enough to structure the distributions over time, preventing anyone from blowing through millions at once. We stood together in his old office at Martinez Industries, looking at the portrait that still hung behind the desk. "Thank you," she said simply, "not just for the money, for everything, for being patient with me, for not giving up on me." "Thank you for proving Grandfather right," I replied. "He always said you had potential. You just needed the right motivation to find it." She laughed. Nearly destroying my life was definitely motivation. "You didn't nearly destroy your life," I corrected her. "You nearly destroyed your old life, the one that was making you miserable anyway. This is your real life, the one you built yourself." And that's the end of my story. Not the end I expected when Vanessa first stormed into my apartment demanding money, but the end Grandfather had planned all along. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to our journey. It wasn't easy, and there were times I wondered if I was being too hard on my sister. But looking at her now, confident, capable, and genuinely happy, I know we made the right choice. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have given in to the demands? Or would you have held firm like I did? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story taught you anything about family, money, or the difference between helping someone and enabling them, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone isn't what they want, it's what they need to grow. Subscribe for more stories about family, money, and the complicated relationships between the two. Until next time, remember, the best inheritance isn't money, it's the strength to earn your own way in the world. But the money doesn't hurt either.